Share screen. This is the right one. No, it isn't. Oh, it's because there we go. There we go. Fantastic. So I am just going to move this down a little bit off camera, and I'll just have to jump back in if anybody joins us. Yay, there we go, fantastic. So thank you for joining us tonight for Tips in 20. I'm just going to do a quick time check so I know. I think I'm going to call it Tips in 20-ish because they tend to run at about 30 minutes, if I'm honest. But Tips in 30 just doesn't sound the same. So I'm going to start by introducing myself. So my name is Charlie Beswick, if you're not familiar with me already. I am the mum to Oliver and Harry. This is Harry on the screen here. I am a teacher of over 16 years, best-selling author of Our Altered Life. I am mentor to mums with an altered life, and I'm an advocate for parent carers in the workplace. My son, Harry, has a facial difference, as you can see there. That's called Goldenhar syndrome, and he's also autistic. So my boys turn 18 next month, but Harry functions around about 5 or 6 years old. I'm a charity founder, and I am a cheeseaholic and a gin lover. And this month's session is all about how to thrive and not just survive in an altered life. And what I mean by an altered life is a life that has been altered by your child's disability or diagnosis of additional needs. So the first question is, why do we struggle? Why are we struggling to thrive in a life that, is ours now? Well, we get overwhelmed by emotions. So for me, things like guilt, grief, sadness, anger, the not knowing why, all of those questions absolutely consumed me. And one that I don't think is talked about very often was jealousy, hence the picture at the start. I remember walking into a shop called Mothercare over here in the UK, which sold all baby items, with my boys in a double buggy, and seeing a couple in front of me who also had twins. And I remember literally being fixed to the spot with rage, with absolute sheer rage that these two were enjoying the life that I'd had planned. And it was just part of my journey. But at that time, it just seeped through every part of me, that rage and that anger and that injustice of everything. We've got the isolation. So there's no doubt about it that you are a different mum to the one you expected to be, and you are different to maybe your fellow mums around you. So for me in particular, I didn't have any mum friends who had disabled children. So instantly there was a difference between me and my peers, and that did create isolation, sometimes from me and sometimes from them. And we'll come on to that in a second. Worries for the future. So this was a big one. What's life going to look like now for my child? What's life going to look like for me and potentially, the siblings or my partner? All of those unknowns. And the big one, the huge one, is what will happen to my child when I die. And what I will say, I should have prefaced the session with this, is that these worries will differ depending on where you are in your journey. So everything I'm talking about tonight, I have felt in abundance over the last 17 years, but this might be something that creeps up on you over time, or it might be something that you're in the thick of right now. That loss of identity and that sense of purpose, that's quite a big one, because all of a sudden we become Harry's mum or your child's mum. And lots of people take umbrage to that. I'm on the fence about being called Harry's mum. It doesn't particularly stress me out too much, but I do recognise that that comes with stripping back a layer of your identity. So to professional, I'm not Charlie, I'm just Harry's mum. And also a lot of the time, mums like myself will have to give up our jobs or go part-time, which means that we lose that sense of self outside of the home. So that's a real struggle for lots of people as well, and has been for me. And battles with a broken system. So that's healthcare and its education, in terms of initially getting any diagnosis that you may need, and then on the back of that, getting the support that we deserve and need for that diagnosis. So those are the reasons why we might struggle with an altered life. So what can we do about them? So how can I thrive when I feel overwhelmed by my emotions is the first question. So the first thing is to give space to those emotions and separate yourself from them. Okay, just move that down there. So by that, I mean recognize when you are feeling guilt, when you are feeling grief, when you are feeling shame, and remind yourself that these are feelings. They will come, they will go. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. So it's not about it's about I am feeling bad, not about I am bad. It's not about identifying as that feeling. It's about recognizing that feeling for sure, but not assuming that that has now become part of your character, because that really isn't the case. So it's about giving space to those emotions and naming them sometimes, just getting it out there and say, this is how I feel. I feel rageful that I've had this baby and somebody else hasn't. I remember when my boys were in special care, my boys were £3.9 when they were born. And so they spent the first 6 weeks of their life in hospital away from me. And I remember coming down out of the maternity unit and seeing a very pregnant woman smoking a cigarette. And I was just furious that she would probably go on to have a perfectly healthy baby whilst Harry had all his challenges. And that ate away at me because I didn't discuss that with anybody else. I just internalized it. It's a bit like rust on the inside. So giving space to those emotions and separating yourself from them and actually recognizing that they're okay. It's okay to feel any and all of the emotions. It doesn't make you bad, it just makes you human. The second point is the difference between acknowledgement and acceptance. And I talk about this quite a lot. So throughout your life, depending on where you are in your journey, there will be parts of your life that you accept. So I accept that Harry has limited communication. I accept that when he's struggling. It doesn't make it any better, I will say. It doesn't mean that I've made my peace with that. But I accept that that's part of our life now and always will be. However, I can't accept, or I struggle to accept, that Harry will one day be left in this world without me and that I will die leaving a very, very vulnerable adult behind. But I can acknowledge that. And in acknowledging it, that then takes me out of the victim mindset and the place where we just feel trapped by all the unknowns. And it means that I can do something about it. And we'll come on to that shortly. But there's a big difference for me between acknowledgement and acceptance, because lots of people will say, oh, you need to accept the life you've got. You need to accept. No, you don't need to accept anything. It helps if you can, because it stops that gnawing away, that internal rust. But if you can't accept it, then at least acknowledge it, because from that place, then you can be proactive and do things about it. Talking to others is one of my huge mistakes. I kept a lot of my feelings and struggles inside. I kept a lot of them to myself. Everybody, when the boys were born, everybody said, you can do this. If anybody can do this, it's you. And it was wonderful. It was lovely that they had so much belief in me. But inadvertently, that created a bar for me to live up to. And so I didn't feel that I could let anybody down by saying that I was struggling, and I didn't. So talking is really important. I didn't talk to my husband, and that's definitely one of the huge reasons why our marriage ended up breaking down. I did talk to my mum, but she was the only person that knew how I felt. Now, this next point, remember, they think but name knows, is more about the feelings of overwhelm when we're out and about and we feel that we're being judged, or we feel that people are staring or watching us. So they might think, for example, let's say Harry's having a meltdown, and I'm going to use my mum as the person. They might think Harry's a naughty boy, but mum knows he's autistic. Or they might think that I'm a terrible parent, but Andrew, my husband, knows I'm a good mum. And what that does is it reframes the setting and it depersonalizes it. So it's not about people judging you. It's about, yes, their judgment, but that's a reflection of them, because the people that do know you and do know your experiences would never judge you in that way. And what I will say, possibly slightly controversially, is that had I not had Harry, with all of his struggles and his disabilities, maybe I would have been a parent at the end of a stressful day that kind of rolled their eyes or tutted at a child screaming in an aisle of a supermarket. I love to think that I wouldn't. I hope that I would never be that parent, but maybe I would. I don't know. And so sometimes we just have to think, it could be a bad moment for them as well as us. And sometimes people are just arses, and that's on them. It's not on us. So they think whatever they think, but whoever knows you well knows the truth. So that's just worth remembering as a little bit of a mantra. Self-care is massively, massively important. And something that I neglected because I was so busy trying to be everything for everyone, to understand everything, to get all the knowledge I could, to find the answers now. I didn't want to wait. I needed to know everything immediately. That I really neglected to look after myself, to take that time to give myself the space for the emotions. And it just bit me on the backside. My boys were 6 when I was diagnosed with depression and had to be medicated because I just got too low. So self-care is an enormous part of your emotional recovery from trauma. And reflections. Now, by this, what I'm meaning is at the end of the day, sometimes days will go quite well and we'll be thrilled and we can pick our wins. And other days won't go so well. So on a good day, it's a good day. And on a bad day, it's a teaching day. So on a day when you are struggling, it's about reflecting back and saying, what could we have done differently? And I have to stress, this is not about blame. This is not you beating yourself up. But this is, if I was in that situation again, which of those pieces could I move differently, like a chess game, for a different outcome? And chances are, it might not have made any difference. But just reflecting from an outsider's perspective, rather than I'm a terrible mother, I did it all wrong, and beating yourself up, that's not helpful. And it closes us down, it puts our brains into panic mode. So we become very restrictive with our view. Whereas when we're reflecting and looking at it as a learning moment, then our mind, our brain neurologically will expand and we can be a little bit more creative and a lot calmer and more accurate because we are our own worst critics. So when we're feeling overwhelmed by our emotions, those are the things to make a start at. The second one was, how can I thrive when I feel so isolated? So talking to your closest family or friends, I've mentioned. Now, some of your family and friends just won't get it. I do have an ebook that if you've got friends that want to understand better, you can send out to them. So I'll pop the link in the email that will come out after this session if you've registered for it. If you haven't registered, then it's on my website. But talk to them about your struggles, talk to them about how they can help. And unfortunately, some friends won't stick around. So actually, we're skipping ahead here to the acknowledgement of the loss of friendships. Some friends will find it really difficult to have to second think all the time. If they are sharing their good news about their child, they don't want to have to feel bad that you can't share that. And that's not a reflection on you as a person. That's just the fact that they can't juggle their emotions and your needs at the same time. And sometimes they will find that you just run out of things in common. Sometimes life will just become too awkward for them. And they have the option to bail out. We don't. So they might do that. So, but again, it's not personal. And so it's really important that we find a tribe. It's a phrase that's mentioned such a lot. And I have to say that I actively avoided finding groups of mums with disabled children because I didn't want to be one of them. I didn't want to be a special needs mum. I wanted to be a normal mum with a normal child or children because I had twins. And I didn't want to be part of that community. And I definitely didn't want to make friends with people just because they'd got disabled children. However, when I met people and I got on with them initially as Charlie, and then I found out they'd got a disabled child, oh, I was fine with that because we'd met each other as individuals. And almost that was me bringing Harry into my world. It absolutely wasn't me entering his. And that was a big mistake for me. And I will say my boys were about 11 before I actually not gave in, but challenged myself and joined a community. And it was just when I started blogging. And because of that reason, I have founded a free Facebook group called SEND, which is an acronym for Special Education Needs and Disability, Send, Gin and Cheese. So that's a free community you are welcome to join if you are the mum of a disabled child. And you might find somebody in there locally, or you can become your tribe, whether that's online or whether it's face-to-face. Making suggestions for meetups that are convenient for you. Now, this can take a little bit of practice and a bit of bravery, but there's nothing worse than going on a play date with all the babies, all the children and toddlers, and you're chasing one around and everybody else is sitting having a cup of coffee, catching up. They walk away after the hour feeling like they've had a really lovely hour and you're absolutely fraught. You're exhausted because you've had to have eyes in the back of your head and you're resentful of the situation you're in because you've not been able to sit and have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea with the mums. So make suggestions. So that might be that you go somewhere and you say, I might have to leave early. I'm going to grab a cup of tea or I might have to leave early. Or is there any chance we can take it in turns with Harry? I'm using Harry, for example. While I catch up with a drink, can we all just do 10 minutes with him, please? So I've got eyes on him. And it's just about having those conversations, because lots of times people will say, oh, yeah, of course, but they would never think to offer that. Um, and also convenient for you. So it might be that you say, can you come to me? Because once we're in my environment, my child's absolutely fine. The downside of that is you can't kick them out. It's harder to get rid of people. Um, but just have a think about what meets your needs and your child's needs, and the right friends will work around that for you. And the ones that don't, unfortunately, might not fit long term into your future. And again, that does bring up feelings of grief and loss. So just be prepared for that. And comparing, please, okay, there's no point me saying don't compare, because we all do it. People without children with disabilities compare, let alone us, when we're trapped in the house, particularly around things like holidays, school holidays. But we are comparing our behind the scenes with everybody else's edited highlights. We're watching their reels of life with their flashy images and their big smiles and their Pinterest worthy activities, whilst we're sitting in our PJs with hair like a bag of chips and breath like the back end of a dog, and we just don't know what we're doing with ourselves. That's not fair. It's really not, you're not being fair on yourself if you're doing that. So, comparison comes with a huge warning. And what I will say is, regardless of where you are in your journey, there will be a mum comparing herself to you, thinking, I wish I'd got it together like they have. And I know you'll deny that, and I know you think that's not true, but I can promise you, I've spoken to hundreds of mums, I can promise you that that's true. So, just be really mindful with comparison. How can I thrive when I feel so worried about the future? So again, this is a big one that we touched on earlier. And I love this quote: worrying is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but gets you nowhere. So, so true. And actually, what I have found over the last 17 years is that the big things that I worried about, the big issues, by the time I arrived there, they'd either been sorted in advance, or it wasn't an issue at all. It was all fine. Or something else happened that I hadn't even considered that made me worry even more. And so worrying is our brain's way of trying to prepare ourselves. So it makes logical sense, but all it does is put us in a state of anxiety, and it robs us of enjoying things now. So I've written there to schedule worry. And I use the example of when Andrew was told that he could potentially be made redundant. So Andrew is my husband, and he was given about 2 months' notice. And we knew, I can't remember the month, but it was about the 23rd, 24th that we were going to find out whether he was made redundant. And we said, okay, we're going to discuss this. We're going to have a conversation about this on the 22nd, and not until then. We're not going to worry until then, because it wasn't sure. We weren't certain what was going to happen. And so if one of us brought it up, we'd say, nope, we're going to do it on the 22nd. It was like a date in the diary. And when the 22nd came, we sat down and we said, okay, worst case scenario, these are our options. Best case scenario, we just carry on as we are. And actually, he didn't get made redundant. He's still in the same job 8 years later. And so we could have had 2 months of absolute hell, worry, stress, anxiety for nothing. So scheduling worry it's a mindset tool. It doesn't always work, but it's worth a try. And being proactive or taking some action. When we are worried about something, the worst thing we can do is that analysis paralysis. So we overthink and we do nothing. So we underact. So, for example, in the case of what's going to happen to my child when I die, and I know this is a huge worry for everybody that's got disabled children, sometimes the first step might be finding out about wills and trusts. So MenCap here in the UK have an amazing free webinar that talks you through the process, even if you just watched that and you didn't do anything for 6 months. It's about taking those steps so that, again, you are out of that victim mindset and you are doing something proactive, because it's the not knowing, it's the having no information that makes us flounder and flap. But once we start getting some information, then we've got a direction. It's like following a torchlight in the dark. So once you're following that light, you can start on a path. What about when you feel lost in yourself? So this comes back to the identity part that I mentioned earlier. So a recap on self-care, really important. And I've specifically written journaling there because this is different to having a diary. Sometimes people will say, well, what's the difference? A diary is simply sitting down and writing the account of your day. So it's more of a regurgitation of your day. Journaling is specifically reflecting on that day. So if your child had a meltdown, if there was an issue, Or if you have got a reoccurring feeling. So, for example, if you are feeling that you are a failure, okay, then you might journal on the question. You might just write the question at the top: why do I feel like such a failure? And you will just write the answers down. Now, what I will say here, top tip, is that you need to write for about 6 minutes, and that's a long time. But 4 to 6 minutes is a sweet spot for getting underneath all the surface stuff, because you'll come out with initially all of the very obvious answers, and once you've peeled them away, a bit like a layer of onion, then you go deeper. So 4 to 6 minutes is the sweet spot with journaling. Um, and then you read it back and you can get a little bit of self-awareness and self-reflection. But again, this is not about blame. It's not about beating yourself up. It is about just discovering where these feelings come from. And once we're in a place of knowledge, then we can act a little bit differently. Doing something for someone else, there are studies that show that altruistic acts can help our anxiety levels. This was mentioned, there was a couple of studies bandied around quite a lot during the COVID pandemic, because people felt so helpless, and anxiety was rife naturally. So doing something for somebody else is really beneficial for you. Habit stacking. So that could be something like squats while you're brushing your teeth for your fitness. It could be something like putting a playlist together, and when you're changing your baby's nappy, you hit play and you have a nappy rave. And just for those 3 minutes or 6 minutes, you're having a little dance with your baby, and it just becomes part of your routine that you're doing. It could be that you go on a walk, you walk the dog when the children are at school or in with childminders, and you listen to a podcast. So it's about, again, linking that self-care with actions that we have to do anyway. And all of this helps us to come back to who we are, and considering your values and how you can live into them in a different way now. So, all I wanted to be when I was young was a teacher. I became a teacher a little bit later in life. So, I was 27 when I became a teacher, and I absolutely loved it. But when I was 30, doing the maths now, too, I had to leave full time teaching, went to part time because of Harry's needs. And then I left altogether because it was just too much. And now I work just 2 days. I still teach at the moment. I leave at the end of this year. But that was really difficult for me because my identity had always been wrapped around making a difference. And so, because making a difference is, if you cut me through the middle, I like to think that I'd be like a stick of rock that said make a difference through the middle. So, as long as I am doing something that lives into that value, then I am happy. So, really do some thinking about what matters to you. What legacy would you like somebody to say about you when you're not here anymore? Because they won't talk about the car you drove or the bag you had or the material things. They will talk about the way that you made people feel and the impact that you made. So, what do you want them to say about you? And how can you demonstrate that now in a different way? Because your situation may be very different than it was. How can you thrive when you are battling with a broken system? Again, healthcare, education systems are on their knees, particularly in the UK at the moment. So, do what you can when you can. Speak to people at the right time, find out who the right people are, be a squeaky wheel. So be that person that, nags, unfortunately, and persists. And one of the things that I always do when I'm talking to professionals is I will say at the end of the meeting, I'll say, okay, that's great. So what I'll do, I'll leave that with you. If I've not heard from you in 2 weeks, I'll call you back. Is that okay? And once you've got a yes, that's okay, or they'll say, oh, can you give it 3 weeks and then email me? I say, yeah, that's fine. But I will give you a call if I've not heard after 4 weeks. And you're almost getting permission from them. So you don't quite feel like you are being the pest that we sometimes feel that we are. So just, sort of agreeing those boundaries ahead of time is really helpful for our own mental well-being. Taking time for self, reoccurring theme here. When we are battling for anything, it's exhausting. It takes such a lot of energy and power from us. So it's really important that we give ourselves 20 minutes, half an hour after a meeting, after a phone call, after we're filling in a form. We have the disability living allowance form over here in the UK, which is horrific to complete. And it leaves mums feeling incredibly, and dads, incredibly low. So after we've done a section of that, because it's too much to do in one go, taking time for yourself is really important. Consider private options. So that's private therapies, private diagnosis. Yes, it comes with a price tag, but sometimes, if you are desperate for the diagnosis, which doesn't guarantee help, I will say, But if you want that diagnosis, then sometimes you have to consider alternative options than waiting. And develop assertive communication styles so that you're not going in there and sort of arguing and riling people up before you've even started, because this is emotive. This is our children's future. It is important. We are angry. We have every right to be angry. But I think when we come from a place of anger, we're blinkered, so our brains close down again, and we're less likely to be cooperative. And also, it gives a bad impression of us, and it sets the tone wrong, because we're not bad people. We're not balls of fury most of the time, but we're mums on a mission. And I make no apology for that, but there is absolutely a positive way of communicating that. So in contrast to the first image of the lady who couldn't even look at her friend's baby, we've got this one here to just reaffirm that once you've mastered those areas, you can live a life that's enjoyable for you and for everybody else around you. And on that note, I have a membership to tell you about. So I talked about the free group, Send Gin and Cheese. I also have a paid membership. Now, this is for you if I'm just reading this out, so I'm sorry if you feel patronised, but some people like it to be read out. If you don't feel present in the moment with your child and family because of worries for the future, if you can't let go of the life you expected and struggle to enjoy it as it is now, you feel distant from your family and friends who don't understand your situation, again, not their fault. You feel consumed at times by the sadness of comparing your life with other people's. You feel intimidated and find it hard to speak with professionals, and or you feel guilty a lot of the time because you can't meet everyone's needs. If you said yes to any or many of those, then this membership is absolutely for you. So included, we get live sessions. So that works on your emotions. So these are my pathways. So it's the emotion pathway that we've talked about, the advocacy pathway, so that assertive communication, and time for self and others. So that includes your other children, your partner, your friends, really important. Mindset transformation sessions, live group mentoring calls each month. So that's with me, 2 every month. Guest experts in. So they will come in and talk to you, all included in the membership, far, far cheaper than it would be to have a one-off consultation with them. Ongoing access to any sessions, recordings, and future membership developments. Once you're in, which is great for that year. And a wonderful community of mums who also live an altered life, and they truly understand not just the struggles, but also the wins as well. And with all of this covered, you will be able to manage your worries, okay? And I'm skipping through this so you can read this at your own pace. You'll surround yourself with good people. You will know what to ask and what to look for in settings and how to manage those setting transitions between, say, nursery and school, school to college, those sort of transitions. You'll be able to discuss options calmly, assertively, with confidence, and really make a difference for your child, and reconnect with who you were before you became a mum, and laugh without guilt, and just have that guilt-free time so that you're having more fun and less resentment in a life that sometimes is really, really challenging. If that sounds like something you're interested in, then we have an early bird offer which closes very soon on Monday, the 5th of June this year. So that offer is £129 for the year. So you get all of the membership features that we've just talked about for the whole year for £129. After the 5th of June, it's still only £150. So it's incredible value. If an annual membership isn't right for you at the moment, then you can pay £12.99 per month. So it is incredible value. And I'm really, really excited. We've got members in there already talking, chatting, meeting each other, and it's a fantastic space. So I am going to stop sharing and take questions and stop the recording now. Ta-da, she says.